episode 4, 5. I don't know.
I
I
lost
feel like
track.
it's cliche for a podcast to say what episode they're on and then realize that they haven't done it. So I'll end that bit. My name is Aramis. I'm with Thomas today, and we're gonna just chat. We haven't talked in a while. I think we probably chatted before the holidays and stuff like that, but we haven't sat down in a long time. So, Thomas, how you doing?
I'm doing good. It's been a minute. And to go back to your bit, because I don't want to kill it, I think it would be hilarious if we introduce each podcast. Like, you know how if you're doing push ups and somebody comes in the room, you automatically jump to like 100 and
Oh
just
yeah.
start counting from there? What if we did that with podcasts? So we were like, welcome to episode 237. And then somebody walks in, they're like, wow, these guys have been podcasting for a while.
I like that. All right, this is episode 237 then.
Cheers.
Um, so I'm doing well. I'm excited. I have Hexagod on the horizons, and I have not talked to you in a little bit about um, your current projects and stuff like that. And so we'll get there in a second, but I wanted to start today's conversation talking about goals for 2025.
Yeah.
Specifically professional goals for us as full-time indie developers, focusing on that because I think sometimes our like personal goals can be all professional, but it's good to have
Yeah.
personal and professional goals. So, do you have any
Yeah.
professional goals for the year or maybe just things you're looking forward to doing?
Definitely. And I'm a very goal oriented person in general. And so I'm usually like on the bandwagon for like New Year's resolutions.
Mm,
But this year I decided I'm still trying to figure out a lot of like, man, we're gonna get real deep real fast here.
perfect.
So I I'm trying to figure out how I want to phrase this. I want to be able to achieve certain goals in my life, but I constantly struggle with how hard to push and how hard to balance, like the ability to rest and uh, how to push towards feasible goals and not overreach,
Yeah.
avoid burnout, all of this stuff. And it's especially hard when you're self employed because you are in control of 100% of your time. And so trying to figure out how to allocate all of that time. Anyway, it's a huge conversation. It's always on my mind. But that being said, this is the first year where I didn't set formal New Year's resolutions, and my general kind of resolution is to figure out how to be more present and to be kind of accept an attitude of gratitude. And so that's kind of what's been on my mind recently. Um, Now, on top of that, of course, there's like things that I want to achieve professionally, but um, yeah, I don't know. I'll let you jump in. Does that resonate with you at all?
Yes. What does formal New Year's resolutions mean? Is that like writing them down and like
Hmm.
saying Thomas's stamp of approval, these are what I want to do?
Yeah, totally. Because it's nice to be able to go back and be like, oh, what did I write down last year?
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm about to do a podcast on my channel with I don't know if you know him. His name's Nikki B from iHeart Game Dev. He does mostly Unity tutorials.
Mm.
He's got like 80,000 subscribers and um, yeah, and he's awesome. He's been following my channel since I started it. But what's cool about him is um, he's very open about how he sets his resolutions, and I went back to one of his previous videos and I saw that I had put my New Year's resolutions on one of his videos like 2 or 3 years ago.
Hmm.
And so it's fun to look back on that and see where I got from there. But um, that's kind of like a huge umbrella for how I view resolutions. But in general, I have input goals and not output goals. So that's
Perfect.
kind of that's kind of how I think about it is like I want to be able to there are some goals that no matter how hard I try, I'm not guaranteed to succeed in them.
Yeah.
And so I would rather measure things that I know are within my power. So things like, hours put towards this or like finishing this game or whatever.
It's interesting in the context of having one of your it's like your this is like a more like a human goal of being present in your life and like
Yep.
from our previous conversations both of us want to be full-time game developers both to prove we can do it but also to have that control over our lives and this becomes the vehicle at which we do it at and like having the context of wanting to have input goals and then having something that is so hard to measure is an interesting contrast. But I get it too, because it's like it's definitely a vibes thing of like, did I live this year in line with my intentions of
Yeah.
being more present, of X, Y, and Z? And I'd be curious if you can think of ways to like check in on that throughout the year or anything like that. Like, how do you know if you'll succeed? I guess is the question.
Yeah. What's the acronym that they use? SMART goals. It's
Mm.
what does it
Mm-hmm.
stand? Have you not heard that term?
Something measurable.
Yeah, measurable is the only one I ever remember. Yeah, that's exactly right. It's
uh,
specific, measurable, attainable, relevant, and timely.
sure.
So yeah, it makes it super measurable.
It's not specific. It's
Yeah.
not measurable.
Yep.
I suppose you could call it timely because you're looking
Yeah.
to do time stuff. Funny enough, I was watching the Mr. Beast games. Controversies aside, controversies. This is a podcast I listen to. He says whenever they talk about stuff, he's like, controversy noted. I admit there's controversy of there. I watched it nonetheless. And one of the people said they don't want to win the money for the money's sake. They want to win the money so they can have time. And they want to be able to stop trading their time for money. And so I guess it is timely because that's what you're trying to do essentially is like the time you have with friends, with family, with each other here, being present in those moments
Yeah.
and take advantage of that.
Yeah. Yeah, I've been reading a book recently called Flow, and it was recommended by Jonas Tyroller
Mm,
for game design purposes. I'm like, great, I'll pick it up because it's like, how do you measure what's fun? You know, and I'm like, as a game designer, I want to know
yeah,
what's fun. How do
yeah.
people get into flow playing a game? And I start reading it, and it's extremely existential. It has nothing to do with game development, and
It's like the
it's all
human
about,
condition.
yeah, exactly. It's like, how do you live a happy life? And I'm like, oh no. Um,
I'm gonna go
and
buy this book literally right now.
it's really good. It's honestly, I might have it right here. Nope, it's lost.
Does it have
But
a little cat on the picture?
no, it's green.
Oh,
It's
I
called
was gonna buy the cat. I'll buy the cat book too. Why not?
uh, uh Flow by Mihaly. Oh my gosh.
Yeah, try to say that last name.
Kizichintamanhali. Oh, that's so probably offensive.
All right. If they're
But yeah,
listening, we're sorry.
the subtitle is The Psychology of Optimal Experience.
Hmm.
And it's such an interesting book. It's probably the most underlined book I've ever read, and I'm only like 80 pages in, but probably more pages have something underlined than don't.
Cool. I bought it.
Nice. I don't remember why we started talking about that.
Having time in your life and
Oh,
the very back question was, what are your goals for the year? And we're
yeah.
diving into like being present.
Yeah. So one of the things that this book talks about is how the most important thing that you have is attention.
Mm,
And I'm
mm-hmm.
also mixing this with another book that I started reading called Peak Mind. But both of them talk about your attention and how, like, your mind has a way of taking in all this data and having a difficult time, or not having a difficult time sifting through what's important. Like your mind has a prioritization structure, and so your
Yeah.
attention, what you focus on, is like one of your major superpowers as a human being, because you can be in a room with a party of people with all these different conversations going around, and
Yeah.
without moving, without doing anything but just how you think, you can pick out distinct conversations and switch your attention over here and listen to them, and then you can tune them out and listen to this conversation over here. So it's really interesting about like where are you putting your attention. And so kind of the impetus for me having this goal of being more present and being more grateful is just like, I don't want to always be striving so much for what's in the future, but I want to recognize what's going on in the present and turn my attention towards the things that I have,
Yeah.
in front of me. So
Yeah. A thing that comes to mind with game development is, especially solo full-time game development where you're self-funded, is always looking at how much longer do you have until your funding runs out.
yeah.
You can chase that rabbit down a hole and constantly be thinking about it and worrying about it and like getting stressed out about that thing instead of being like, I'm doing it. Regardless if it's like, oh, I'm financially stable, it's like we're currently doing it. You're like you're living the quote unquote like indie dream of being a full-time developer now. You stop and smell the roses and look around and like it's been interesting. My partner got a new job and she's at that point where it's about 3 months in where she's starting to understand A, how much she doesn't know, and B, understands the stresses of the job and is becoming good enough where she's always able to go find more stuff to do at the job. It's like when you just get your sea legs at a new job. And so feeling her feel that stress and then kind of where I'm at in my job and what I'm doing, it's like, oh, I don't miss that at all.
Yeah.
Like trying to live this job without that stress. Even though there is stress, right? I have a game coming up in 2 months. I'm surprisingly not stressed out about it because I think I've had that intention from. I feel like I hit me in the fall a little bit. Like I was getting really anxious and really like caught up in myself. And I think it came down to like when I was streaming a bunch. I was feeling really bad when I wouldn't stream because
Hmm.
I was like, "Oh, I need the time off. I need the break. My like to be creative, my mind needs to be in a certain space." And then I kind of took that aside and said, "You know what? Right now I'm going to be a game developer. And I'm going to focus on that." And like although I miss streaming and I still do it on Fridays, it's like in the last couple months I feel like I've become more present in the enjoying this journey and knowing that like even though I'm releasing Hexagon in March, whatever's going to be there is going to be there.
Yeah.
Let me try to make it as good as possible right now and not worry about working 12-hour days right now
Yeah.
and like keep that vibe going because I want to do this in the long run. And I'm not in this to make a hit game. Yes, I would like to make a hit game and stuff like that, but it's like I don't think you and I are trying to be the best solo indie game developers in the world.
Hmm.
That's not really why we're here. It's not why we're doing this. And so we don't need to put in 12 to 14-hour days, which feels like a weird thing to say.
Yeah. No, I think that's exactly right. I was listening to a podcast with Jonathan Blow, and he made a comment about how um, he said something very similar to like if you want to be the best or like leave a mark in an industry, you need to be putting in at least 12-hour days.
Yeah.
And I listened to that and I'm like, yeah, you're probably right, but
Yeah.
that's not my goal.
Yeah. Which is interesting. Like the context of how much success you need to be a sustainable indie game developer is so low. It's so low. Like I've always been fascinated by that. Like we don't like you can a game that sells 10,000 copies could be a year or two's worth of funding
Yeah.
or 10x that, 100,000, that's like almost a retirement plan, right? Like
Yep.
and that's not even that many players relative to the quote unquote solo hit games like Balatro and like Stardew Valley who have millions of copies sold.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's interesting because the approach that I'm taking to game development is release small scoped games across a plethora of platforms
Hmm.
and have a small bit of income coming from each income source. And I I told my wife that it's interesting because I'm doing what I want to be doing day to day, and it's never going to get more difficult. I don't think the like I'm getting better at making games. I'm building up a YouTube audience as well. And everything that I'm doing, it's just going to be the same work, but the payoff is going to grow as time goes on, which is really interesting.
Your efficiency will go up.
Yeah.
Like your ability to implement a new solution, you're going to get it right more often than not. I play a lot of D&D, and so there's a lot of dice rolling of D20s. Your proficiency score in game development is going up, or design, or art, or
Hmm.
I'm adding controller support right now.
Yep.
I'm doing the best I've ever done at controller support right now because I did it for Chess Survivors, and now I'm doing it for Hexagon. And like the
Yep.
next time, I'll do it even better. And like that scales. Like individually speaking, the size of the games we make might not scale, but our ability to get things correct might not be the right word, but like get them good enough on the first try is going to go up. And
Yeah.
so you're going to start hitting successful implementations of things sooner and sooner, because I feel like that's something with Hexagod here I felt is like I made a lot of really bad design choices over the last 9 months. Part of that is this game had the most design I've had in a game. Like relative to Chess Survivors, where I took Vampire Survivors plus chess, I had a very like known what the design was going to be from the conception of the idea. Where like Hexagod, there was so much more like me designing and building systems that it taught me so much more.
Hmm.
And so I'm interested to see how these next games go and maybe pivoting into your current prototype. Are you feeling that sort of growth at all relative to tanks but no tanks and relative to bridges and docks and like the other little prototypes you built? How is that feeling now that you are working on a new game?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like I've felt this way for a while, where I feel like I have the technical capabilities to build basically whatever I want. Like I don't feel limited creatively
Hmm.
by my technical capabilities anymore, which is a really awesome feeling. But I am intentionally kind of throttling myself so that I can ship smaller games because I don't want to be sucked into, like a 2-year project. Um, with my new game, which is it's really interesting because I'm taking all of the knowledge from previous projects and bringing it in, but I'm also bringing in literal like code that I have already completed, which is amazing.
Yeah,
It's like as I've been a solo developer, I've started building out this comprehensive library, and I named it after my game studio. I call it like the SSG utility library, and it's a folder in my project, and it's like modular enough that I can just drag it and drop it. And so I already have all the controller support, and I can make every type of console platform controller like vibrate based off of different conditions and stuff, and like music library and title screens. I made my own menus, like all of this
hmm,
stuff that um, displaying symbols for controllers. Like I have it, you can just drag in a sprite, connect it to a thing, and then tie it to a controller action. And so it knows the action, it knows the platform that it's running on, and it will just change the sprite at runtime so that it
sure.
displays, the right, stuff like that. It takes all of a lot of the heavy lifting for like the core of the project so that I can just focus on the actual gameplay.
The fiddly stuff.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. The stuff that nobody does because like people make a game jam game, and then they leave a lot of that stuff out and then they move on to the next project. But
Yeah,
to like ship a game, you need all the fiddly stuff. I like that.
yeah. Yeah, that is fiddly.
Hmm.
I spent the whole morning doing controller support stuff for Hexagod,
Hmm.
and it's just fiddly.
Yep.
Just do test, like poke around, see if it's if the focus goes to the right thing you need to go to, and keep messing with it.
Yep.
Cool. That was my big question. I guess was my first question was going to be around goals and professional things for 2025. So we talked about a
Yeah.
bunch of random stuff. Do you have
Yeah.
a topic you want to talk about?
Yeah. So my question for you is the first one that I came up with is if you had to start over, or like you can phrase it as if you could go back in time and talk to young Aramis, um, but if you had no experience, if you didn't know anything, but you knew enough that you could build yourself a roadmap, like how would you change your game developer journey? Is there anything that you would say, man, I really hated this phase of doing game development. I wish I could have skipped it, or I wish I would have spent time learning shaders early on, or I wish I would have never switched to Godot, so, stuff like that.
Um, I still don't know how to use shaders and how they work,
Yeah,
and
me neither.
I have a math major and have done classes literally like linear algebra is like how shaders work basically. And have I have a book back there that has all linear algebra stuff for matrix transformations, and I just no idea what it is,
Yep.
um, which is weird. Uh, I think the one thing that stood out to me when you asked that question is the first time I became a full time game developer. I really just stumbled into it after quitting a shitty company that was really toxic, and like I think what I would want to have changed in my roadmap is to basically have crossed that off of a 9 months and instead more or less like Chess Survivors took from inception to the time I fully released it took like a year and a half. It's like 9 months of full is like 5 months of full time work because I spent the first 4 months of that messing around. 5 months of full time work and then like 10-ish months of hobbyist game development on it. And I think what I would have preferred maybe to do is just like have gotten another job and then focused on trying to get a game released, get that out of my system, and then did what I'm doing now, which is go into it with like a business plan, much better, like a lot more experience under my belt.
Hmm.
I didn't go into this experience with like an idea for the game I wanted to make. I had some prototype ideas, but like hitting the ground with like having had a game or two published and like released on Steam first, like commercial games fully released, I think would have been something I would have changed in my roadmap to get to the point where I am today. I mean,
Hmm.
I don't think that would have necessarily like helped or hindered anything. It just might have been like, I don't know, just a different experience. So that's probably what I would have done. And that's just like when it's more like what you did, right? You came into being a full time solo game developer with a bit more experience in the game development space, I would say.
Hmm.
So probably something like that would be where I'd go.
Hmm.
But otherwise, like the actual learning to do game development, I feel like I did it very naturally and just like finding my path and the way my brain works and the way I want to make games. And you're going to have to bash your head against a bunch of prototypes that you make that are simply just way too big for your skills. But each of the times you do something, you're going to learn something new about game development. And eventually you'll like have your graveyard of game prototypes will be big enough that you can start like building projects on top of the graveyard, I guess.
Yeah. Wow, that is such a good analogy.
Not bad, right?
Oh man, I'm just thinking about the corpses of all my prototypes that I've
Yeah.
started, and I'm
I thought
like,
about like there's a shelf too that's like full of just like dead projects in there, but it's like there's a lot of them. And
yeah,
I was watching Jotson do he took over the Godot channel and he did that. He walked through all of his prototypes over the years. And you can see in his current project, Ridiculous Shipping he's making, you can see all the little relics of things he figured out throughout those prototypes culminating together in this one game, which is
yeah,
super cool.
yeah. That's really awesome.
Yeah. Would you change anything in your career or your journey, I guess, your game dev
Yeah.
journey?
I there's a couple things when I was thinking about this question that I think the biggest thing is I wish I would have started earlier. I graduated college with a computer science degree and
Yeah.
I had like programming skills and I was interested in game development, but I just put it off for years
Yep.
and I wish that I would have just because I in my mind I thought okay, it's not a viable career path for me. It's like some people can make money doing it, but it's kind of like it's not an easy industry to get into and that and YouTube. I wish I could have would have just started turning on a camera and recording myself learning game dev,
Yeah.
and gotten like a 3 or 4 year head start from where I'm at now. That's probably the biggest thing.
Yeah. They're both things that you need to take a lot of cracks at doing to get better at.
Yeah.
Like I feel like you and I both kind of found our voices on our YouTube channels and that'll continue to change and grow over the years, but like it took a couple years of YouTube to find that.
Yeah.
It's going to take a couple more games to find something that like oh my gosh, I'm truly really proud of this game. That's going to take a couple more games for us to it could be this game, it could be the next one, right? But like it's taken a lot of prototyping to get to where we're at. And like I see some of the people in our discords who are young and they're like in the like late high schools, like high schoolers and stuff like that, who are making projects and doing things. I'm like, oh my gosh, I should have been doing that. Like
Yeah.
I should have been. I don't know, maybe not though, because it's like, what was I doing as a high schooler? I was messing around with my friends, exploring romantic relationships for the first time, having a job, like
Yeah.
um, being in sports and stuff. And so could I have maybe sacrificed some things to focus on game development or like start exploring game development back then? Possibly, but it just like wasn't even on my radar. I was
Yeah.
like playing kids or playing. I guess I maybe was playing with other kids, but like playing games and shit like that. So
Yeah.
I
My
don't know.
nephew is uh 9, 8, 9, somewhere around there. And he He does like a homeschool charter school hybrid sort of thing, but
Mm,
they do like this. They basically do coding classes in like Scratch or something, and so
wow.
he's like making simple games
Yeah.
in elementary school, and I'm just like, man, that's so cool. Like he's like recreating like the fundamentals of Minecraft just using like logic blocks, you know, and I'm like, that's so neat. I wish that I had that growing up.
I think basic math is decently important up until like algebra and like geometry in high school. Looking back, seemed like they were trying to teach us logic,
Yeah,
especially doing like, I don't know if you had to do them, but we had to do like proofs to prove that two triangles are equivalent using axioms and stuff.
yeah,
And so you had to like logically state out why is this triangle equivalent to that one. Given that you know these angles and sides are the same length and stuff like that. So that's like trying to teach you to do like logical thinking and stuff. I imagine making games or prototyping or like um, programming would be a really, really good way to develop those skills.
yeah,
Because there's
yeah,
it's all
totally.
logic at the end of the day, right? Your
Yeah,
logic and a little bit of syntax on top of it, and like your if this and that or this other thing, then do this thing. Like
yeah,
that's all straight logic.
yeah. It's like logic and problem solving,
Yeah.
critical thinking. Yeah. I'm interested. We don't have to stay on this topic because it can be like kind of a big one. But with like the advent of AI, how do you think that's going to change the realm of education? Because I feel like when the internet first came around, we kind of had this shift where um, information was less valuable, right?
Hmm.
Like you know, our parents probably went to class and they like memorized dates for like certain historical events and stuff. And now there's much less of that because that kind of information is just at our fingertips. So
Mm.
then I feel like a lot of the value from education was like either like skills based or like primarily critical thinking, you know, like how do you think well?
Hmm.
But now with like large language models, we have like we're sort of on the cusp of having a technology that can think critically. And so, what do you think? And we can scope this to game dev too. Like
Yeah.
if you just want to say like you know somebody 10 years from now if they want to like learn to make video games, what do you think that'll look like?
Um, I have no idea how it will impact education of young people. Um, because I could have seen myself writing papers with it as a kid. Being dyslexic, like spelling and grammar are things that are really hard for me. And so in the last, like in my professional career, I've leaned heavily on grammar checkers and spell checkers and like um, using technology to help me write better. Maybe not write better because it's like I still feel like I can communicate really effectively. It's just like it helps me with my weaknesses in grammar and stuff like that and in
Mm-hmm.
spelling and stuff like it. Like smooths it all out so it is communicated effectively through English.
Mm-hmm.
But I think I come up with the good ideas and good approaches to communication still. Um, so that's become imperative. So much to the point where like when I have to write stuff down on paper, I get just insane anxiety. Like writing a card to somebody like for a
Yeah.
wedding, it is
Mm-hmm.
literally like pulling teeth for me. And I will just I'll write it into a like Google Docs. I'll put it in
Mm-hmm.
a sheet and I'll be like, okay, this is what I want to say, and I just copy it down like letter for letter to
Yeah.
put it into their thing. Because it's like I can't spell check what I wrote. I can't click
Mm-hmm.
like, oh, is this correct or not? So,
Yeah.
um, I could totally see myself having used ChatGPT to write papers in high school. So I think
Mm-hmm.
that's ultimately a really probably a problematic thing in the long run. But circling to game development, I just made a YouTube video about that where it's like I used ChatGPT for a month basically to help, and it turned into just literally a coworker who would sit next to me.
Yeah.
And one of the problems I felt was that it's like a little bit too much of a yes man. Like
Mm.
they're overly positive, they're overly like agreeable, and even when you tell them to be critical, and I paid for the nicer model, I'll be like, hey, push back on me. The pushing back was few and far between,
Mm-hmm.
and I don't think that it's necessarily always what we need, and that'll never replace like getting actual feedback from players, but it
Mm-hmm.
can certainly supplement it for us.
Yeah.
Um, I'm doing game development coaching, and one of the first people who actually reached out, and the reason I'm doing it, he was using ChatGPT to help him learn game development, having no coding experience whatsoever. And the project was absolutely a giant pile of spaghetti when we sat down and started chatting.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but it got him to the point where he almost had a playable demo,
Mm-hmm.
and his idea was there. He had no idea how to expand upon it and keep working on the project, and that's what we've been doing in the last couple of sessions. But it's like it got him really, really far. And a
Mm-hmm.
lot of the people I've talked to, they're like, it's helped me understand the right words to Google, the right words to ask. What are the terminology things I need to do, especially if you don't come from a background of having some programming experience or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so my hope would be that it lowers the barrier to entry for people to get into the space.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but I think at the end of the day, we are still going to have to be the things that add the soul to the
Yeah.
game,
Yeah.
the soul to the artwork, the soul to the thing. And like it's going to be, if you just rely too much on it, it's going to be very bland, and people will
Yeah.
tell that. And so there's going to be probably a bunch of like AI made games out there, but I am assuming the games that still have the human soul in it will bubble up to the top.
Yeah.
And you'll just have people or legislation that says, "Hey, you have to tell people you used AI heavily in this project."
Yeah. Yeah. I agree.
What do you think
Yeah.
about
I
AI maybe in school? And because I don't have a kid, I don't really ever plan on having kids. So you have
yeah.
one, it's going to become something you have to actually think about and worry about. And
Yeah.
so I'd be interested in your context.
It's another one of those things where it's like at something at face value just seems disconnected, but then suddenly you get existential real quick and you're
Yeah.
thinking, okay, what is the point of education? Like what is my kid learning? Like what's the importance of like English and math, and like what do I want them to take away from their school experience? Like making friends, like there's a social aspect, there's
Oh
so
yeah.
many things. And
Having other authoritative figures in your life other than your parents is a,
yeah.
a big thing. Like coaches were a big thing for me growing up with sports and stuff. And like
Hmm.
having those different type of people can help give you different perspectives, I guess, as a kid.
Yeah, totally. And so I don't know. I'm still very early on in my journey. I mean, my daughter's 1 years old, so I have some
Yeah.
time to figure it out. But
Hmm.
I am opening up my vision to see different types of ways that people are creatively educating their children. And like one of the things that I came across was the synthesis school is what it's called, and it's the guy who um, started the in-house school at Tesla or SpaceX,
Mm.
some sort of association with Elon Musk, and like the school that they had in the company that people could bring there,
Wow.
and it's like very STEM focused. And there right now, I think it's like it's not a full school. It's just like a tutoring and mentorship in critical thinking. But
Hmm.
they hire game developers to create games for collaborative problem solving like in abstract arenas. And it's like grade schoolers that are doing this. And so it's
For
like
like Ender's Game type situations.
yeah, very very similar. It's pretty wild to think about. It's like you see these kids who you think should be like picking their nose, and they're like creating like a hierarchy of roles to accomplish this like mission where they're like trying to like solve economic problems where it's like
Yeah.
countries have like certain GDP, and it's like all this stuff. I'm like, this is nuts. But it's cool, I but it does make me elevate the role of critical thinking in education, and
Yeah.
trying to think outside the box. So
Yeah. I think that's, I don't know. I have no idea. I'm interested to see where we go with AI, I suppose, where I'll end my thoughts.
yeah. Okay, I have another question for you.
Yeah.
Since this podcast is called Scope Creepers, my
Yeah.
question to you is what has been out of scope for you recently that you've had to cut?
What have I moved to my out of scope section?
Yeah.
I think this goes back to the presence in life of like I don't want to release Hexagod in the end of March, which is 2 months away at this point, and be burnt out.
Mhm.
I just don't want to do it. It's not why I'm doing this. I don't want to do it. I've never ever been someone who's like, let me stay an extra day. Let me open my laptop tonight and make tomorrow morning easier for me at a job. I'm like, I'll deal with that tomorrow morning. Even if I'm like anxious, I'm like, no, I'm gonna go play video games and I'm gonna like not think about it. I'm gonna go
Mhm.
chill. I've never been someone who's like opening my laptop at night.
Mm-hmm.
And so something that has moved out of scope recently is it's like I have villagers in my game that you can plop down. They're really cute. And I wanted to have a cute villagers patch where you get to basically like plop them in, name them, and change all of their like clothing. And I thought it'd be really interesting from a having a roguelike, you can then have like an in-game currency you get. A lot of things will have meta progression and stuff like that for power. I don't like that shit. None of that in my game.
Mm-hmm.
But I was like, one thing that could be fun is to give people the ability to purchase cosmetics, hats
Mm-hmm.
and shirts and stuff like that, that they can just like unlock through earning coins and then they get to buy those little shirts.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Still really cool. Absolutely not going to make it
Yeah.
by the end. And that could be something where like I haven't fully decided if my game's going to go early access or full release or stuff like that. So it's really going to be the next fest that determines what that's going to look like.
Yeah.
Um, but I could see that being something I add in post release if the game is like has a high enough level of success that I'm like, ooh, I should keep developing this. That is 100% a patch I would add in.
Yeah.
And that's just something that got dropped. And I'm like, oh yeah, it sucks, but like I know that games are never finished; they're just released, and I can always keep adding stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but like I'm not, I don't know. I'm in such a weird spot of being so chill. I was not chill about Chess Survivors, but I think Chess Survivors when I was a month away from the next fest, I was not in a place where it was ready.
Yeah.
This game could go live in the next fest right now, and it would be fine.
Mm-hmm.
Will it be better in a
That's great.
month, giving me more time because I have to like redo my Steam page and stuff? Yeah, absolutely, it'll be better. But like,
Mm-hmm.
I think about a month ago, I got into a state where I'm like, oh, this thing's ready to be in a next fest.
That's
So
not how you're supposed to do it. You're not supposed to keep your build stable. You're supposed to have everything come together right at the last second and hope it doesn't break.
I'm doing multi-day pushes right now with new builds. I'm just like, I
Nice.
change something and I push it and I post about it in my Discord and say, hey, it's there if you want to look at it. And there's just like this long list of like, because I was doing like weekly and I'm like, no, we're gonna go way more rapid and just like always be buildable.
That's awesome.
And so I'm just trying to push little things constantly, little fixes, little changes.
That's awesome.
Um,
So do you
so
have
yeah,
your build pipeline all streamlined so that
no,
you can just
absolutely
like
not.
Oh, okay.
I export with Godot. There's a button. It takes seconds in Godot to export stuff. You can like export to all your platforms, and then I have Windows, and so there's a tool in the Steam SDK that you can open, and you just press publish. It pulls from the folder and pushes up to the build depots, and then log into the build depot, and then have to go press publish, and then have to type in a code to prove I'm not a
Yep.
robot to
Yep.
Steam, and then I'm done.
Yep.
And then I have to double check to be like, oh wait, did I put it into to demo mode and like disable my like developer powers? And I
Mm-hmm.
always have to check that because I always forget it, which
Yep.
like gives you
Yeah.
people basically like infinite resources.
That's amazing.
How about you? Any scope creep things? I guess like you're early in a project,
Yeah.
so maybe give me a. I'd love to hear like a update of where you're at, and
Yeah.
then have you made any sort of out of scope decisions about that yet?
Yeah. Well, it's interesting because I think the last time we chatted, we ended with talking about all of the possibilities where I could take this
Yeah,
new
people like
game.
that podcast. Like 1,000 views.
Oh, really? I didn't know
Yeah,
that. That's awesome.
yeah.
That was yeah, that was great. I mean, we came up with a lot of good ideas for what this game could be, and that's the hard part. Is like I don't. It's harder to identify scope creep when you're this early on in a project because it doesn't really have an identity, and maybe that's different for like somebody tagged me on Twitter in a post yesterday about having a game design document and asking a question about it and like pivoting mid project, and I'm like, I am not the right person to ask. I think probably somebody with more experience and like better game designers might be able to front load a lot of the design work, but for me it's like super iterative and kind of doing a lot of vibe checks, along the way, and
Yeah.
kind of just being subjective about it. So all that to say, I haven't really cut anything that's out of scope, and if I have, it's more of just like a push it off to like a, oh, that's not super important right now, but I might come back to it.
Yeah.
Because I do have a lot of ideas. I think that I think the presence of castles in my game would be a big thing, but before that, I'm testing out a feature right now for upgrading islands, so that you can have multiple islands. And if you're not familiar with the game, I guess I should briefly describe it. You have one or more islands that you have soldiers that inhabit. Right now, there's swordsmen and archers, and enemy islands spawn in a grid around the map and are connected via bridges. Um,
And
added
docs.
and docks, yeah, both of those. Funny enough, and you fight to take down the enemy bases before they can take down yours. And I like how it's set up right now because originally I just had one big island in the middle, and
Hmm.
now there are a lot of mini islands. And the idea is that you can upgrade individual mini islands, and they can have better fortifications or more troops or whatever. Um, but I like that because you don't, and I might change this too. I'm gonna test this out to see if you can place where you want your own islands to spawn or if it will be random. But the
Sure.
randomization factor is kind of fun because your troops might be separated across the entire map, and now you have to figure out how do I either consolidate them so they're more powerful together,
Hmm.
or like, defend this but leave this space and the troops. It's I think it buzzes my mind in the right ways, which I'm excited about. All that to say, I haven't really cut anything there. The things that I have been cutting have been more at like the project level because I'm juggling a few projects right now.
Yeah.
Um, I'm I'm also porting Tanks But No Tanks to the Nintendo Switch, which has been a fun little thing.
Look back at
Um,
old code.
yeah, exactly. And
Like,
it's not great, but everything mostly works. It's just the controller mapping that I'm trying to iron out, which will be I think I have most of the stuff figured out there. And then another thing that I'm working on right now is after I launched Bridges and Docks, which is like an island generation game. A lot of people asked me about making a video on my YouTube channel for procedural generation in
mm.
Unity,
Hmm.
and so I'm taking that and I'm trying my first online course. So I'm
Hell
going
yeah.
to, yeah, I have it all mapped out. It's going to be split into like the theoretical and the practical. And so it's like, what is procedural generation? Like, how do you use Perlin noise to influence things in a game?
Yeah.
Um, and then the practical, there's going to be like two or three different projects that I kind of walk through and like give examples from my game Bridges and Docks and how you can procedurally generate content.
Mm.
So that's something that's been on one of the projects that I'm juggling as well. So that's, I guess, when you talk about cutting scope, it's more about me managing my schedule, which is not really the same thing. But
I guess it is.
yeah,
I would say it's probably the same thing.
yeah,
I like the making a course that's like specific.
yeah,
Like I could see myself being like, I am having a hard time with these YouTube videos, and they're just not like, because one of the problems with YouTube tutorials is they're just always like, they're almost like too specific, and
mm-hmm,
they're rarely like chained together nicely.
mm-hmm.
Some people do like 20-part series and stuff like that. But having the like I could go and be like, oh, I want to do Unity procedure generation, and being like, I want to pay $10 for a course. Boom, there you go. There's a specific course that
Yeah.
walks you through something and has oh, there's a game on Steam that is associated with it too. Could be kind of cool.
Yeah, that's kind of what I thought too, because I wanted to try out making online courses just to see if it would be a viable avenue for supplementing more revenue.
Mm-hmm.
And this is a topic that I people reach out to me asking about, but I also thought I couldn't make a YouTube video about it because I don't think the people who watch my channel really want tutorials. So
True.
I think it'll be the best of all worlds. So
Yeah, I like that. I think one of my goals post Text of God release is to do that as well. To think about what a tutorial could be, not tutorial, but like an online course could be as a diversification of income.
yeah, and as a budding developer, like if I could go back 3 or 4 years, and I knew that there was like an indie game developer that released a cool little game and then also released like a little course that talked about how they designed it, that I would be all over that. So I think that's pretty interesting because it's very like practical.
Yeah, and it gives you there's a certain notoriety to having a game release that I think you can stamp it with. Like, hey, this is how I made my Steam game.
Yeah,
It's
totally.
clickable.
Yeah.
Yeah. Speaking of, I guess bridges and docks, I'm gonna go into my next question. Um, I am trying. One of my goals with Hexagod is to get through the Steam Deck verification process.
Hmm.
And I noticed as I was, because I guess I got a Steam Deck the other day, and I was clicking through my library, and Bridges and Docks is, I think, the yellow marker, which is like
Hmm.
playable,
Yeah.
is what the term is, I think, right?
Yep. Yep.
Maybe? I don't know. How did you go through that process? Did you go through that process? And then, like, what was the feedback like after they did their review? I'd be curious to know how that all happens.
It actually, I think getting like the actual like certification, like Steam Deck verified, is a bit more involved. I think the one that I got was pretty hands off. I actually don't remember what it all entailed. I remember reaching out to some people in my community that had a Steam Deck and they tested it and they gave me some feedback, which mostly was like, "Oh, you know what? I remember actually the one thing that's keeping me from being verified on the Steam Deck is that the text is too small
Hmm.
for the UI."
And
So
what's the, is it like 12-point font is like a goal
I don't know.
or higher?
I didn't
Yeah.
even look into it. People talk a lot about the Steam Deck, and I remember looking into. I think it was either Chris Sikowski or the what's the Game Discover Code newsletter was talking about the metrics of Steam players that own or play games on a Steam Deck,
Yeah.
and it was like something so small,
Hmm.
just like such a small percentage. And I'm like, oh, okay, then I'm not even gonna like try to be officially verified on it because it's just not worth my time. That
Sure.
was kind of my approach to it.
Yeah.
um I don't know. I mean, I'm sure that those numbers are rising because more people are adopting it. But it seems like in the grand scheme of things, I don't know if it would be. Well, I don't know, because even if it's a niche market, people are with a Steam Deck are probably searching with that filter on. So
Yeah. The library, literally, you open it up and it shows you a list of ones that have the green check mark.
yeah,
Like if you go to the store page, it's like here are all the ones that are really good. Like we've approved of like these ones we recommend you play.
yeah,
So, um, hmm. I partially want to have it work really well on a Steam Deck because I think Hex God would be good on a Steam Deck, and
yeah,
I think it would be cool to be able to bring it to people that I know who maybe play games um, that don't play Steam games. I could say, hey, I want you to play my game and check it out, and here it is. You can
yeah,
check it out and play it.
yeah,
I think that it's like bringing your Switch and having the same thing, like
yeah, exactly.
basically be like, hey, you want to play the game? Here it is on the Switch. You can check it out now. Um, and it's an interesting learning experience, just like to have controller support as well in a game. I
Yeah,
think
controller
is
support sucks.
it does suck.
Yeah.
But one of the cool things it's done for me is it's helped me simplify my UI and UX.
Mm-hmm.
And then that in turn has simplified the game to be there's like 10 actions you can do in the game at most. And like
Mm-hmm.
half of those are like opening a menu to like leave the game.
Yeah.
So there's like 5 things you can do in the game at any given time. And that is actually really helpful.
Mm-hmm.
It's really interesting to do. Like I'm calling it like one scene games.
Oh yeah.
Like that will be my recommendation for people is to like you have one or one screen would be a
Yeah.
good way of thinking about it. You have one screen. You can
Mm-hmm.
like Balatro, one that's a one screen game.
Yeah.
Um Stardew Valley, not a one screen game.
Yeah.
You're going to multiple places and doing multiple things. And like if that game was just the farm, like just the farm scene, that would be a one screen area. You
Mm-hmm.
can go in your hut, you can leave the hut, right? You can sell your stuff, all those things. But like the fact that you start leaving, that balloons the scope of the game
Yeah.
like exponentially.
Yeah.
And so my goal, I think, in general, is to do one scene games, and then within that one scene, making the user experience just a very linear and like very easy to follow process.
Mm-hmm.
Kind of like Bridges and Docks, right? There's
Yeah.
not, one of the really nice things about it. It's a very simple game. You
Yep.
like are building Legos.
Yep.
and the things you can do are limited and great, and they're like full. And
Yep.
like I was playing it on my Steam Deck. I'm like, oh, I was like testing it out, and I started building an island, just like not even thinking, just building stuff and putting things down, messing
Mm-hmm.
around with how the controller support works. So
Mm-hmm.
um,
Yeah.
yeah.
How does that work in like I've been using Unity's new input system, which is really nice because you define actions
Hmm.
and then you can map different control schemes
Yep.
to it. I assume it's similar
That's
in
how
like
Godot
a
works. Yeah, there's a
okay.
whole action input thing, and you name them and you attach inputs to it and stuff like that. Um, Changing inputs is not like that's not a built-in feature to like remap them. But
Yep.
there are plenty of add-ons that help that. And like you were mentioning your controller glyphs, there's a really nice controller glyphs add-on for Godot um, that does the same thing. It has capabilities of mapping your own images if you want to for all the various controllers, but it also comes with a set of glyphs for all of the kind of
Oh,
major
really?
controllers inside of it.
Wow.
They're not that pretty, but they're definitely functional. They're
Nice.
like I could not have to change them, and I won't probably change them, and they work fine.
Nice.
Otherwise, I probably just would download Kenny assets and then
Yep.
spend an hour remapping them myself or some shit like that. So,
Yep. Yep.
um,
Nice.
yeah. So it's not too bad. I'll be interested to see in the long run. Um, I guess I don't even know how to see how many people are using a Steam Deck on my games. Um, so
Yeah, I could probably look while we're chatting too. That might be an interesting
I should probably
stat.
cap my work on it though. That brings up a good point. I shouldn't spend the next month working on Steam Deck support.
Yeah,
So I'm close. I feel like I'm like 5 hours away from it being like very, very playable on a Steam Deck.
that's awesome. Are
Um,
you doing influencer outreach for your launch? Are you gonna send out Steam keys and stuff?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah, because I know some of the influencers that I've reached out to, their channel revolves around handheld games only,
Sure.
and so they won't unless it's on like Switch or Steam Deck, they won't review it, which
Huh.
I thought was pretty interesting.
That is interesting. I will absolutely uh, ask you who those people are.
Yeah, I have actually. I'll share my spreadsheet with you. I have a spreadsheet of influencers that because if you get emails from YouTube, they only let you collect like 5 emails a day or something,
Yep,
and so you
I
have to be super
with chess
consistent.
survivors, I slowly like every day I would go and find a new one. So I have a list of
Yeah,
all those people, but a lot of those people are not gonna want to play Hexagod.
yeah, it was the same with me too. There's sometimes they're very specific in a niche that aren't gonna. But
Nah, my success as a creator is built around Retromation liking me and knowing me.
yeah,
He's made 4 videos about my games, 3 of which were it's like a total of like 80,000 views across all the videos. So
oh, that's amazing.
got to put him in the game somehow. Got to put a real Civ engineer cheat code in there too to give one of the villagers a little hard hat.
Oh, that's cute.
I should do that shit like
You
that. That's how
should,
you
yeah.
can bait people to play your game. Like
I tried doing that when I launched Tanks But No Tanks. There's one YouTuber that covered like a history of like the Wii Tanks video game and
yeah.
has played like Wii Tanks mods and stuff like that. And I'm like, I'm gonna try to get this guy to cover my game. And I put in a custom level with his logo in it and like had like a custom tank color for him.
Mm.
And I sent it to him. And like there's like a cheat that you could enter in on the title screen to unlock it so that he could play it. And he just like wasn't interested. And
Did
I'm
he
like, oh,
respond?
he did, and he
Okay.
he was nice about it. He just said he was busy and stuff, and I'm like, I
Yeah.
get it,
That's
but
fair. But you
but
got
it
him to
is it.
respond, which is a huge that's half the
Yeah,
battle.
yeah,
Like to actually read it and like say it. That's like why I always tell people on my stream, I'm like, if you're gonna reach out to people, write a handwritten email.
yeah. You have
Do
to
not put
personalize
bold, do
everyone.
not put italicized stuff. Like
Yeah,
you can put a picture if you want, but like make it a normal ass email.
yeah.
And I've been getting a lot of these like emails from people saying respond and we'll send you a key for our game.
Uh,
I'm just like, no, just
yeah,
send me the key for the game,
yeah.
and then I'll
Keys are
have the key for the
free.
game, and I'll play it if I
Yeah,
want to. Like,
yeah, exactly.
I'm not gonna respond to you to get a key. I did respond to somebody. It was for like the Claw roguelike game. Um,
Hmm.
so they sent me a key for that game, which is kind of cool. So don't say you don't get any. You don't say you don't get nothing from doing YouTube. You can get free
Yeah,
keys sometimes.
that's okay. I actually, if you want to transition into YouTube perks, I have an interesting story. But
We can.
first,
Those are my 2 questions. Unless you have other
okay.
questions.
I have a third one, but it's not great. But I pulled up my Steam Deck stats.
Okay.
So for Tanks but no tanks and bridges and docks.
How do you see that?
It's just in your financial reports. If you go to the stats for your revenue at the
Yeah.
top, there's a Steam Deck button
Uh,
at the very top where it says Home Products Packages.
okay. You can keep going. Steam
Um,
Deck.
so the percentage of total playtime from deck users, Steam Deck users, for tanks but no tanks is 8%. And on bridges and docks, it's 3% for me. So 3 and 8% of all players are playing on a Steam Deck, which is actually higher than I would have guessed.
Chess Survivors is 5%.
Okay, yeah, so basically split the difference between us, between my two games.
Yeah. And that is over the course of, I guess, I don't know how many total hours I have played on Chess Survivors. But Chess Survivors has sold like 8,000 copies at this point. So decent sampling
Yeah,
size.
that's great. Yeah.
Huh. That's not
Yeah.
very many. It's not very much. But
Yep.
my game is also not verified at all. So maybe that would change if you get the verified check mark.
Yep.
I feel like it does. I don't know.
Yeah. Well, if it pushes it into the storefront or the
Yeah.
UI on the Steam Deck, then surely, right?
You would basically right now probably buy one of our games on Steam and then also have a Steam Deck
Yeah.
and then play it on the Steam Deck.
Yeah.
That's not very many people, but I wrote it as a goal. I want to learn. I want to try to get Steam Deck verified. And
Yeah.
did you have to ask to go through the verification process, or did they automatically push your game through it?
I don't remember. I think it was. I think I did it because you can do the same thing for normal controller support. Like you can say like, to be like fully supported with like a PlayStation and Xbox controller, like you need to be able to start the game and everything with just the controller. There's like a bunch of there's like formal certification.
Is
for
there an
that,
actual review process for that?
I don't remember.
Okay.
I just remember it was a little wizard that you had to go through, and it wasn't really involved from my experience.
Sure.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't know. I'm happy to go through it offline, and we can go through
Not
my
not a
games
big
too,
deal.
if you want.
I'll figure it out.
Yeah.
Worst case scenario, I email Steam and they respond because their support's actually pretty great.
Yeah, it is.
At least for developers. I've never used them as a consumer.
Yeah. Oh, this is an interesting stat too. So Steam Deck accounted for 4.3% of all playtime. So I guess they just averaged for all of my games, 4.3%.
Across all the different playtime people you've done. Okay.
Yeah. Pretty interesting.
Not bad.
Yep.
All players. Playtime across all of Aarimous Studios is 12,000 hours. That's wild.
Yeah, that's crazy.
That's weird. That's a weird stat to have.
Yep.
It took away 12,000 hours from humanity.
Yep. Was it for the better?
It's at least a wash.
Yeah. That's a great answer.
Yeah. I don't think it's a positive or a negative. It's just is.
Cool.
YouTube stuff? Do you have thoughts, questions on that stuff? We can dive into that, or
Oh yeah, YouTube. Let's see. I don't know if I want to announce this.
or we can wrap up this podcast and chat offline.
Yeah. Yeah, let's just wrap it up, and if people
Right about
are
an
interested
hour,
in-
almost exactly. That's perfect.
Yeah, that's beautiful. And if you're listening to this and you made it to the end and you wish we would have talked more about YouTube stuff, then leave a comment.
Leave a
and we will
comment.
do it next time.
Cool.
Cool.
Bye.
Bye bye. Nice.
So then, will I be able to download that somewhere, or
Download
do I have to
what?
like give you permission